Hello. This is Emilio. And I came to read you a book. The High Hide. Oh, this is Jurassic Park. Yeah. The High Hide. The first of the raptors hissed as it began jumping up, clattering against the high hide, shaking the structure. Its claws raked against the metal, and it fell down again. Eddie was astonished at how high it jumped. The animal could leap 8 feet straight up, again and again, without apparent effort. Its jumps attracted the other animals, which slowly began to circle the hide. Soon the hide was surrounded by leaping, snarling raptors. It swayed back and forth as the animal slammed into it, clawing for purchase, and fell back again. But more ominously, Levine saw they were learning. Already, some of them began to use their clawed forearms to grip the structure, holding on while their legs got footing. One of the raptors came within a few feet of their little shelter before finally falling back. The falls never seemed to hurt the animals. They immediately leapt up and jumped again. Eddie and the kids scrambled to their feet. Levine said, "Get back. Don't look out." He pushed the kids into the center of the shelter. Eddie was bent over his knapsack and held up an incandescent flare. He popped it and flung it over the side. 2 of the raptors fell away from it, and the flare sputtered on the wet ground, casting harsh red shadows. But the raptors kept coming. Eddie pulled up one of the aluminum bars from the floor and leaned over the side railing, brandishing the bar like a club. One of the raptors had already climbed high enough to dart forward, jaws gaping at Eddie's neck. Surprised, Eddie shouted and jerked his head back. The raptor narrowly missed, but his jaws closed on his shirt. The raptor fell back, the jaws clenching tight, and its weight pulled Eddie forward over the railing. He yelled, "Help me! Help me!" And he started to topple over the side. Levine threw his arms around him, dragging him back. Levine looked past his shoulder at the raptor, which was now dangling in empty space, hissing furiously, still gripping at Eddie's shirt. Eddie pounded the raptor on the snout with his bar, but the raptor held like a bulldog. Eddie was bent precariously over the railing. He might fall at any moment. He jabbed the bar finally into the animal's eye, and abruptly the raptor released its grip. The 2 men fell back into the shelter. When they got to their feet, they saw raptors climbing up over the sides of the hide, and as they appeared at the railing, Eddie swung at them with a strut, knocking them back. "Quick!" he shouted to the kids. "Up on the roof, quick!" Kelly started climbing one of the struts up to the roof, and then pushed herself easily up on it. Arby just stood there, his expression blank. She looked back down and said, "Come on, Arb." But the boy was frozen, his eyes wide with fear. Levine ran to him and lifted him up. Eddie was swinging the strut in wide arcs, the metal smacking against the various raptors that held on. One of the raptors finally caught the strut in his jaws and jerked it hard. Eddie lost his balance, twisted, and fell backwards, toppling over the side. He cried as he fell, "No!" And immediately, all the animals that were on the hide dropped to the ground, and they heard Eddie screaming into the night. The raptors snarled as they ate him alive. Levine was terrified now. He was still holding Arby in his arms, pushing up to the roof. "Go on," he kept saying. "Go on, go on." From the roof, Kelly was saying, "You can do it, Arb." The boy gripped the roof, pulling himself up, his legs churning in the panic. He kicked Levine hard in the mouth, and Levine dropped him. He saw the boy slide away and drop backwards to the ground. "Oh, Christ," Levine said. "Oh, Christ." Thorne was underneath the trailer, unhooking the cables. He released it and crawled out and sprinted for the Jeep. He heard the whir of a motor and saw Sarah had gone to the motorbike and was already racing off, a Lindstrat rifle slung across her shoulder. He got behind the wheel and turned on the engine. and waited impatiently while the cable winched in, the hook sliding across the grass. It seemed to take forever. Now the cable was snaking around the tree. He waited. He looked over and saw the light from Sarah's bike moving off into the foliage, heading down to the high hide. At last, the motor stopped, and Thorne threw the car into gear and roared away from the clearing. The radio clicked. "Ian," he said. "Don't worry about me," Malcolm said in a dreamy voice. "I'm just fine." Kelly was lying flat on the angled roof of the high-hide shed, looking down over the side. She saw Harvey hit the ground, and on the other side of the structure from Eddie. He seemed to hit the ground hard, but she didn't know what happened to him, because she had turned away to grip the red roof again, and when she looked back down, Harvey was gone. Gone. Sarah Harding drove fast on the muddy jungle road. She wasn't sure where she was, but she thought by following the terrain downward, down the slope, she'd eventually come out to the plain where the high hide was located. At least that was her hope. She accelerated, came around a curve, and suddenly saw a big tree blocking the road. She braked to a stop and spun the bike around and headed back again. Further up the road, she saw Thorne's twin headlights turning off to the right, and so she followed him. Levine stood in the center of the high hide, frozen in terror, much like Arby was. The raptors were no longer jumping, no longer trying to climb the structure. No, he heard them down on the ground, snarling. He heard the sharp crunch of bones. The boy had never made a sound. The cold sweat broke out over his body. Then he heard Arby shout, "Back! Get back!" Up on the roof, Kelly twisted around, trying to see down through the side when she heard him. In the dying light of the flare, she saw Arby was inside the cage, the shark cage they had brought along with them. He had managed to close the door, and reaching his hand back through the bars to turn the key in the lock. There were 3 raptors near him. They leapt forward when they saw his hand front the bars, and he pulled it back quickly. He shouted, "Get back!" The raptors began to bite the cage, turning their heads sideways to gnaw at the bars. Hang on. To turn the key in the lock. Where is it? One of the animals got its lower jaw tangled up in a looped elastic band that hung from the key. The raptor pulled his head away, stretching the elastic. Suddenly, the key snapped toward the lock and smacked against his neck. The raptor, squealing in surprise, and stepped backwards. The elastic was now looped tight around the lower jaw, the key glistening in the light. The raptor scratched at it with his forearms, trying to pull the elastic loop off. But it was caught around the curved back teeth. Thank you, Arya. And the animal's efforts just made the elastic snap on the skin. Soon it gave up and began rubbing its snout in the dirt, trying to get the key off somehow. Meanwhile, the other raptors managed to pull the cage free from the superstructure and knocked it over onto the ground. They ducked their heads, slashing Arby behind the bars. When they realized that couldn't work, they kicked it. They stomped the cage repeatedly, and more of the raptors joined them. Soon, there were 7 clustered around the cage. They kicked it and rolled it away from the hide. Their bodies blocked her view of Arby. She heard a faint sound and looked at the 2 headlights in the distance. It was a car. Someone was coming. Arby, meanwhile, was in hell. Inside the cage, he was surrounded by the black, snarling shapes. The raptors couldn't get their jaws through the bars, but their hot saliva dripped down onto him. And when they kicked, their claws came through, slashing his arms and shoulders as he rolled. His body was bruised, and his head hurt from banging against the bars. His world was swirling, terrifying pandemonium, and he knew only one thing was certainty. The raptors were rolling him away from the hide. As the car came closer, Levine went to the railing and looked down. In the light of the red flare, he saw 3 raptors dragging what remained of Eddie's body toward the jungle. They paused frequently to fight over it, snapping at each other, but they still managed to haul it away to be eaten later. Quick side note, love. I'm actually still adding words here and there to make the story a little more exciting, I guess. Can you hear it? I don't know, but I love you. I'll get back to the story. Then he saw another group of raptors were kicking and pushing the cage. They rolled it down the game trail and into the forest. He could hear the rumble of the Jeep engine, and the car came closer. He saw Thorn's silhouette behind the wheel. He hoped he had a gun, 'cause Levine now wanted to kill every one of those damned animals. He wanted to kill them all. Red was all that he saw. Up on the roof, Kelly watched the raptors kicking the cage, rolling it away. One raptor remained behind, though, turning around and round in circles like a frustrated dog. Then she saw it. The raptor had caught its jaw in the elastic loop, and the key still dangled along his cheek, glinting in the red light. The raptor jerked his head up and down, trying to get it free. The raptor came roaring forward. The Jeep came roaring forward, and the raptor seemed confused by the sudden bright lights. As Thorn accelerated, trying to hit it with his car, the raptor turned and ran off and out into the plain. Kelly scrambled off the roof and headed down. Thorn threw open the door as Levine jumped into the car. "They got the kid," Levine said, pointing down the trail. Kelly was still coming down, shouting, "Wait!" Thorn said, "Get back up there. Sarah's coming. We'll get Abby." "But we can't lose them." Thorn gunned the engine and started down the trail, chasing the raptors. In the trailer, Ian Malcolm listened to the voices shouting over the radio. He heard the panic, the confusion. Black noise, he thought. Everything going to hell at once. Once again. 100,000 things interacting. The chaos. He sighed and closed his eyes. Thorn drove fast. The jungle danced around them. The trail ahead began to narrow, and the big palms edging closer, slapping the car. He said, "Can we make it?" "It's wide enough," Levine said. "I walked it earlier today. Perez used this trail." "How could this happen?" Thorn said. "The cage was attached to the scaffolding." "I don't know," Levine said. "It broke off." How? "I didn't see. A lot happened." "And Eddie," Thorn said grimly. "At least it was fast," Levine said. The Jeep plunged into the jungle, bouncing hard, following the game trail. They banged their heads on the cloth roof. Thorn drove recklessly. Up ahead, the raptors were moving fast. You could hardly see the last of the animal sprinting into the darkness ahead. "They wouldn't listen to me," Kelly shouted as Sarah pulled up on the motorcycle. "About what?" "The raptor took the key. Arby's locked in the cage, and the raptor took the key." "Where?" Sarah said. "There," she said, pointing across the plain. In the moonlight, they could see the dark shape of the fleeing raptor. "We need the key." "Get on," Sarah said, unshouldering her rifle. Sarah climbed behind her on the bike. Sarah thrust the guns into her hand. "Can you shoot?" "No, I never..." "Can you drive a bike?" "No, Then you have to shoot," Sarah said. "Now look, trigger's here, okay? Safety's here. Twist it like this, okay? It'll be a rough slide, so don't release it until we get close." "Close to what?" But Sarah didn't hear her. She gunned the engine, and the bike accelerated forward, heading out to the plain, chasing the raptor. Kelly put one arm around Sarah and tried to hold on. The Jeep bounced along the jungle trail, splashing in the muddy pools. "I don't remember it being this rough," Levine said, clutching the arm hold. "Maybe you should slow down." "Hell no," Thorn said. "If we lose sight of him, it's over. We don't know where the raptor nest is. In this jungle at night." "Ah, hell!" Up ahead, the raptors were leaving the trail, running off into the underbrush. The cage was gone. Thorn could not see the terrain very well, but it looked like a sheer hill going straight down. "You can't do it," Levine said. "It's too steep." "I have to do it," Thorn said. "Don't be crazy," Levine said. "Face facts. We've lost the kid, Doc. It's too bad, but we've lost him." Thorn glared at Levine. "He didn't give up on you," he said, "and we're not giving up on him." Thorne spun the wheel and drove the jeep over the edge. The cars nosed down sickeningly, gaining speed and began a steep descent. "Shit," Levine yelled. "You'll kill us all!" "Hang on!" Bouncing, they plunged toward the darkness. And that's it. The next one is the sixth configuration. I'll read the quote. Order collapses in simultaneously regions. Survival is now unlikely for individuals and groups. Ian Malcolm. And